She was just a janitor's daughter, until she uncovered a $1 billion conspiracy that CEOs, lawyers, and boardrooms missed. At 17, Elena Carter walked into a high-rise boardroom and stopped a deal that could have destroyed an empire. What she found, buried in the fine print, exposed fraud, betrayal, and the people closest to power. But speaking the truth made her a target. Who stood with her, and who tried to silence her forever? This is the story of the girl they underestimated, and the justice she ignited. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shake the world. The vacuum hummed softly across the marble floors of Sterling and Crane Capital's 32nd floor, echoing like white noise in the night. Elena Carter moved with practiced silence, her faded hoodie pulled tight over her braids, and a maintenance badge swinging loosely from her lanyard. Most kids her age were home scrolling through social media or sleeping in prep for finals. But for Elena, nights meant wiping down boardroom tables, sorting shredded memos, and watching her mother scrub glass walls with the tired rhythm of someone who'd been ignored most of her life. She had just finished dusting the long oak conference table when the low glow of a printer caught her eye. A single folder sat in the output tray, labeled in embossed silver ink, "Merger Agreement, Final Draft." It was thick, bound, important. Elena should have walked past it like she had 100 other files. But something about the weight of the folder, the way it was left half open as if forgotten mid-print, made her pause. She glanced down the hallway. Empty. Her mother's vacuum was 2 rooms over. Slowly, Elena slid the folder out and opened it. Her eyes skimmed the intro page. She didn't know every corporate term, but she understood the stakes. A multi-billion-dollar merger between Sterling and Crane and Harrow Global, a move that had the whole finance district buzzing. She flipped to the liability section instinctively. Ever since she watched a documentary on the Enron collapse with her grandfather, she'd developed a sixth sense for danger hidden in fine print. And there it was, subsection D, paragraph 4. All post-merger financial, legal, and reputational risk to be assumed by the acquiring entity, Sterling and Crane Capital. Elena blinked. That couldn't be right. She reread it. The wording was legal slick, buried under layers of jargon, but the meaning was clear. If anything went wrong, fraud, debt, lawsuits, Sterling and Crane would take the fall. Harrow Global would walk away untouched. It was a trap. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. She knew she shouldn't be reading this. She was a janitor's daughter, not a lawyer. But she also knew if Miles Sterling signed this tomorrow, he wouldn't just be risking his company. He'd be walking into a corporate execution. She pulled out her phone, screen cracked at the corner, and took a photo of the page, then another. And another. Her heart pounded. The printer light clicked off behind her, casting the room into shadow. Elena, her mother's voice called from down the hall. She shoved the folder back exactly where she found it and hurried out, wiping her sweaty palms on her jeans. That night, she barely slept. The words replayed in her head over and over. Post-merger liability, reputational risk, acquiring entity. By morning, the images were still on her phone, burned into her memory. She hadn't planned to act. She really hadn't. But when she walked into the building the next day for her shift, something inside her shifted. The executive meeting was happening. Right now, on the 40th floor. Before she could think, she pressed the elevator button. Up, up, up. When the door slid open to the top floor, she stepped into a hall that smelled like polished wood and power. Voices filtered from a conference room down the hall. She followed them, heart hammering, until she reached the frosted glass doors. Inside, Miles Sterling sat at the head of the table, silver pen poised over a stack of pristine papers. His wife, Natalie, laughed lightly beside him. Across from them sat Blake Harrow, all designer suit and artificial charm. Elena didn't knock. She pushed open the door and walked in. "Wait," she said, breathless. "Don't sign that, please. That clause, it's a setup." Every head turned. Silence fell like a dropped coin. And in that moment, with nothing but her voice and the truth in her pocket, the janitor's daughter stepped into the fire. For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the boardroom was electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Elena stood just inside the doorway, her sneakers damp from the rain outside, her hoodie zipped up to her chin. Blake Harrow was the first to recover. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Excuse me, young lady," he said, voice silky. "Who exactly are you?" Miles Sterling didn't speak. His pen hovered in midair, the contract page beneath it glowing under the recessed ceiling lights. Natalie's eyes narrowed. "She's the janitor's daughter," she said coldly. "This is wildly inappropriate." "I know," Elena replied, her voice shaking just slightly. "But that doesn't make me wrong." She took a breath and looked directly at Miles. "On page 16, there's a clause that transfers all legal and financial liability to your company after the merger. If anything goes wrong, if Harrow's books aren't clean, if lawsuits hit, you take the fall, not them." A low murmur passed through the room. One of the junior executives pulled the document toward him and started flipping pages. Another tapped his tablet, scrolling rapidly. Natalie's expression darkened. "She shouldn't even be here." "I know I shouldn't," Elena said, chin lifting, "but someone had to read it." Miles finally set the pen down. Slowly, deliberately, he turned to page 16. His eyes moved over the lines. Then again, his brow furrowed. For a man known for his calm, his stillness now spoke volumes. Natalie leaned in. "Miles, this is ridiculous. She's a child. She doesn't even know what she's talking about." Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not a lawyer, but I know how a trap looks." Blake chuckled under his breath. "Are we really letting someone who mops floors weigh in on 8-figure contracts?" "No," Miles said quietly, still staring at the clause. "But we're letting her slow me down long enough to take a second look." His voice wasn't angry. It was cold, focused, the kind of tone that suggested something in him had cracked. "Elena Carter," he said, glancing up. "Is that your name?" She nodded, unsure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad one. He closed the folder. "You'll need to leave this floor immediately." Security had already stepped into the doorway. They didn't touch her, but the message was clear. Elena backed out of the room, pulse pounding in her ears. But just before the door clicked shut, she caught Miles looking at her, not with dismissal, not even anger, with something else. Recognition, maybe even doubt in himself. Downstairs, she was marched to HR. Her mother, Monica, had already been called in. She sat in a stiff chair, her hands balled in her lap, eyes stormy with worry. "What did you do?" she hissed when Elena sat beside her. "I tried to stop him from signing something dangerous," Elena whispered. "They don't pay me to raise whistleblowers. They pay me to clean." Monica snapped. "I didn't plan it. I saw it. I couldn't let it happen." Before Monica could respond, a woman from HR emerged with a clipboard and a tight smile. "Miss Carter, your daughter is being placed on temporary leave pending internal review. You are also suspended for breaching protocol." Monica's lips pressed into a hard line. She stood without a word, gripping Elena's wrist, and led her out through the front lobby into the gray drizzle outside. They walked in silence until they reached the bus stop. "I was trying to help," Elena said softly, her voice almost drowned out by traffic. Monica stared ahead. "Try helping me keep our jobs next time." Back home, Elena curled up on the worn couch, her phone clutched in her hand. A million thoughts churned through her head. Had she just made everything worse? Then her phone buzzed. One new message. No name, no subject. Just 4 words. "You were right, DW." Her breath caught. She clicked it open. Inside, a second message. "I saw that clause in 2019. Different merger. Same game. Call me." Her hands trembled, but for the first time that day, it wasn't from fear. It was from knowing she wasn't alone. The next morning, the city moved like nothing had happened. Coffee lines stretched around corners, stock tickers blinked on digital towers, and inside Sterling and Crane, the polished halls gleamed as if they weren't one breath away from disaster. Miles Sterling sat alone in his private office, blinds half closed, the unsigned contract lying open on his desk like a wound. He stared at it, not reading, just letting his eyes rest on the words Elena Carter had pointed out. Subsection D, paragraph 4. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, smoothly written, deceptively standard. But a dagger all the same. He leaned back, ran a hand through his hair, and whispered, "How the hell did I miss this?" His email pinged. Subject, confidential, you need to see this. Attached was an internal compliance audit from a merger 3 years ago, another deal Harrow Global had pulled out of just before the partner company collapsed. Same structure, same clause, same ghost trails of offshore accounts. He opened another file, redacted names, flagged transfers, all of it pointing to one man and one silent accomplice. Natalie Sterling. His chest tightened. Could she really have known? She had pushed this deal for months, had dinner with Blake Harrow, smoothed out legal disagreements behind closed doors. Every time Miles questioned something, she gave the same answer. Just trust me. That phrase burned now. Across the city, Alina sat hunched at her mother's kitchen table, still in her pajamas, her laptop open to a string of encrypted emails from DW, Daniel Webb. He used to work in legal compliance at Harrow Global. Quiet, invisible. Until he flagged a similar clause in a merger deal that went belly up in Houston. The company folded under lawsuits he'd written. Harrow walked away clean. Same setup. No one listened. Elena clicked through his files, PDFs, offshore routing codes, screenshots of internal emails. She didn't understand all the terminology, but she understood enough. They'd done this before, and now they were doing it again. Only this time, she saw it first. Her phone buzzed. Private number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Carter. Daniel's voice rasped. You're in the middle of something very dangerous. I know, she whispered, but I can't unsee it. You're not the only one digging. Be careful who you trust. The line went dead. Elena sat frozen for a moment before pulling out a notebook and jotting down everything, names, connections, odd overlaps in company registries. She didn't know what all of it meant, but she knew where it was pointing. Back to Natalie Sterling. That afternoon, Miles attended a donor summit hosted at the Metro Tower Ballroom. Natalie arrived 20 minutes late, looking flawless in a steel blue suit, her smile sharp as ever. She touched his arm gently. Everything okay? I need to talk to you, he said, guiding her toward the edge of the room. You're still thinking about that girl? She asked with a sigh. Her name is Elena, and she was right. Natalie's smile didn't fade, but something in her eyes narrowed. Miles, you're letting paranoia cloud judgment. Blake's firm is reputable. That clause is boilerplate. Every merger has liability terms. But they don't all push all risk onto the buyer. She tilted her head. You think I missed that? I think maybe you didn't. Silence stretched. She looked away, then back. Are you accusing me of something? I don't know, he admitted. That's the part that scares me. Later that night, after Natalie had gone to sleep, Miles couldn't. He left their penthouse, took the elevator down to the private garage, and drove to the downtown lounge he used when he needed to think. He didn't drink, just sat in the back corner booth and watched. At a table across the room, dimly lit by chandelier light, Blake Harrow was laughing. Sitting beside him, Natalie. Her hand rested lightly on his wrist. A flash drive passed between them, a brush of fingers too soft to be professional. Miles stared, nausea rising. Everything he had built, the woman he had built it with. Back at home, Elena's inbox lit up again. One new message from Daniel. Look into Natalie's accounts. Cayman, Zurich, Belize. You'll find what they're hiding. Her pulse spiked. She opened a public finance registry, typed in the name. There it was. Natalie Sterling, linked to a dormant trust, offshore. Oh my God, Elena whispered. The deeper she looked, the dirtier it got. And now she knew. This wasn't just a bad deal. It was a setup. And Natalie Sterling was neck-deep in it. The air inside courtroom 8C felt thick, like the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Cameras waited outside in droves, journalists lined the front rows with sharpened pens, and security had doubled at every door. Sterling and Crane's reputation was hanging by a thread, and so was Miles Sterling's. He sat stiffly at the defense table beside his attorney, while across the aisle, Blake Harrow leaned back with the smirk of a man who still believed money could silence truth. Beside him, Natalie Sterling looked poised, calm, every inch the elegant executive, until the first piece of evidence hit the screen. Victoria Mason, the prosecutor brought in from the U.S. Attorney's Office, wasted no time. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her strategy was precision. Not fire, but facts. Line after line of email chains between Harrow Global and Natalie's personal accounts. A map of transfers to 3 offshore trusts. Names of shell corporations. All linked to the same mysterious clause that Elena Carter had discovered. Every slide told a story, and every story pointed to conspiracy. Miles watched from his seat, jaw clenched. He hadn't spoken to Natalie since confronting her 2 nights earlier. Her only response then had been, "Don't confuse your guilt with my ambition." Now, her ambition was unraveling in front of a jury. But it was only when Victoria turned and said, "Your Honor," I'd like to call Elena Carter to the stand. The courtroom shifted. Gasps fluttered. Elena walked slowly to the front, her hair braided neatly, her hands steady despite the thudding in her chest. She wore a navy blazer, borrowed from her mother's coworker, and the same sneakers she wore the night she entered that boardroom. But now, the room didn't see her as a janitor's daughter. They saw something else, something no one could define, but everyone could feel. She raised her right hand, swore in, and sat. "Miss Carter," Victoria said gently, "can you tell the court how you first became involved in this matter?" Elena looked toward the jury. "I was helping my mom clean offices on the 32nd floor. I found a folder in the printer tray. Something about it made me stop and read. I don't know why, just instinct." "What did you find?" There was a clause. It looked normal, but it wasn't. It made Sterling and Crane responsible for every risk in the merger. Harrow Global would walk away no matter what happened. Victoria nodded. "What did you do next?" "I told Mr. Sterling. Or, I tried to. I walked into the boardroom before he signed." The opposing attorney stood for cross-examination, a lean man in a charcoal suit with a gleaming watch and a voice dipped in condescension. "Miss Carter, how old are you?" 17. "And your occupation?" "I'm a student. I help my mom after school." "You're not a legal expert, are you?" "No, sir." "You don't have a degree in business law?" "No, sir." "Then how could you possibly understand the implications of a multi-million-dollar merger contract?" Elena's voice didn't waver. "Because sometimes you don't need a degree to spot something wrong. You just need to look where no one else is looking." The room stilled. The attorney pressed. "Are you suggesting you know better than Sterling's entire legal team?" "No," she said simply. "I'm suggesting they didn't care to notice." Whispers swirled behind her. The judge banged the gavel for silence. Elena stayed composed. When Miles took the stand later, Victoria asked just one question. "Why did you believe her?" He looked at Elena, then at the jury. "Because she saw what I was too comfortable to question. She reminded me that the truth doesn't care about job titles." Then came the moment no one expected. Natalie Sterling was called to the stand. She walked tall, chin high, but when the audio file played, her voice whispering, "Push him, he'll never question it," the room shifted. Her mask cracked. And when asked why she didn't stop the fraud, she whispered, "Because she saw it." The girl, she saw it all. Outside, the sun had dipped below the skyline, but something had broken through the clouds. Inside that courtroom, the truth had found its voice. And her name was Elena Carter. The verdict came down just before noon. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, the air tense with the weight of consequences. Elena sat between Victoria Mason and her mother, Monica, who clutched her daughter's hand so tightly it turned pale. Across the aisle, Miles Sterling stood behind his defense team, face carved from stone. On the other side, Blake Harrow adjusted his cufflinks with the calm arrogance of someone still convinced he'd walk away clean. Natalie Sterling didn't look at anyone, her eyes locked on a single point in the wall, as if denying everything unfolding around her. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge entered. The jury filed in, stone-faced, deliberate, carrying the silence of decision. Elena held her breath. "On the count of conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, we find the defendants guilty." Whispers exploded in the room. "On the count of falsifying financial records, guilty." Blake's smirk flickered, then vanished. "On the count of obstruction of justice and malicious contract tampering, guilty." Natalie's hands, folded tightly in her lap, trembled. The judge's sentence was swift and merciless, 10 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 7. Both defendants were led from the room in cuffs, their former power reduced to the quiet shuffle of footsteps on a linoleum floor. Elena exhaled, tears stinging her eyes, not from fear, not even relief, but from something deeper. Justice. Real, tangible, hard-earned justice. Outside the courthouse, the world had already changed. Crowds lined the stairs, reporters swarmed with cameras and mics, but they weren't shouting for the CEO. They were calling for a teenager. Elena Carter. The girl who read what no one else did, who stepped into the room where she was never meant to be and changed everything. "What does this mean to you, Elena?" one reporter shouted. She paused, the city's noise rushing in around her. "It means truth isn't about status, and justice doesn't care how clean your shoes are." Flashes burst from every angle. Her mother held her close as they pushed through the crowd. But Elena didn't shrink back. She held her head high. For the first time in her life, the world was listening. In the weeks that followed, Sterling and Crane didn't collapse. It transformed. Miles announced a full internal review and corporate restructuring. Dozens of board members resigned. A new transparency division was formed, led by Victoria Mason. And in the press conference that followed, Miles stepped onto the stage not as a CEO, but as a man who had been humbled. "I built this company on ambition," he said. "But it took a high school student to show me what integrity really looks like." He turned to Elena, seated beside him in a crisp white blouse and navy blazer, and smiled. "Today, we're proud to announce the creation of the Elena Carter Civic Fellowship, a program for young leaders who see what others miss and dare to speak." Applause erupted across the room. Elena stood, blinking back disbelief, then pride. That night, she sat on the fire escape outside their apartment, the city glowing beneath her. Her mother joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You still scared?" Monica asked. "Yeah," Elena said, taking a sip. "But I'm more sure than scared." Monica smiled. "That's how I know you're not a kid anymore." Inside the Sterling Tower, now scrubbed clean of old plaques and nameplates, Miles placed a manila envelope on a new shelf beside a polished plaque. It read, "Truth isn't loud, but it lasts." Beside it was a photo. Elena, standing at a witness stand, eyes fierce with purpose. Down the street, a bus passed by, its side plastered with a quote, "Because sometimes the janitor's daughter sees the dirt first." And somewhere, in homes and classrooms and boardrooms across the country, a new generation of watchers, readers, and quiet truth-tellers started to believe that maybe, just maybe, their voice mattered too. In a world that often confuses power with position and truth with polish, Elena Carter's story reminds us of a lesson that cuts deeper than any courtroom verdict. Courage has no age, and integrity wears no uniform. You don't need a law degree to recognize injustice. You don't need a title to speak the truth. Sometimes all it takes is a brave voice from the margins to shake the foundations of the powerful. This story teaches us that doing the right thing often comes at a cost: reputation, safety, even relationships. But the cost of silence is far greater. Elena didn't act because it was easy. She acted because her conscience refused to stay quiet. And in doing so, she became more than just a teenager in a hoodie. She became a symbol of what it means to stand tall when everyone else looks away. We live in a time where truth is often buried beneath wealth, power, and influence. But truth doesn't need a spotlight to shine. It needs people, young or old, rich or poor, who are willing to lift it up. And as long as there are Elena Carters in this world, hope remains alive. So tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that your voice matters, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that inspire, empower, and remind us of the strength within ordinary people.